The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed burned like small suns, and every breath I took sent sharp pain through my ribs like broken glass grinding against bone. I blinked slowly, trying to remember where I was, how I got here, why my entire body felt like it had been thrown down a concrete staircase. The last thing I remembered was the intersection near Fifth Avenue, the screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal, and then nothing but darkness. A man in blue scrubs stood beside my bed, his expression careful and measured, in that way doctors have when they're preparing to deliver news that's going to hurt worse than any physical injury. His name tag read Dr. Nathan Kim, Chief of Trauma Surgery. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the sort of eyes that had seen too much suffering, but hadn't hardened completely. "Mrs. Aldrich," he said gently, and hearing my name felt like an anchor pulling me back to reality. "You're at Mount Sinai Hospital. You were in a serious car accident. A delivery truck ran a red light and hit your vehicle on the driver's side. You've been unconscious for about 6 hours. 6 hours. The words floated in my mind like objects in zero gravity. 6 hours of my life, just gone. You have 3 fractured ribs, a severe concussion, and significant bruising throughout your body," Dr. Kim continued. "We had to perform emergency surgery to repair internal bleeding. You're incredibly fortunate, Mrs. Aldrich. The impact could have been fatal." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw and dry. He handed me a small cup of water with a straw, and I sipped carefully. The cool liquid felt like mercy. "Jasper," I finally managed to whisper. "My son. Did someone call my son?" Something shifted in Dr. Kim's expression, a microscopic change that sent alarm bells ringing through my foggy brain. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside my bed, and that simple action told me everything I needed to know. Doctors don't sit when they're delivering routine information. They sit when what they're about to say requires gravity, requires compassion, requires preparation for emotional fallout. "Mrs. Aldrich," he began, his voice taking on that particular gentleness that precedes devastation. "When you were brought in unconscious, we followed standard protocol for emergency contacts. Your son was listed as your primary contact in your phone." My heart started beating faster, sending fresh waves of pain through my damaged ribs. "I called him approximately 4 hours ago when we were preparing you for surgery. The situation was critical at that point. We weren't certain you would survive the procedure." Dr. Kim paused, and in that pause, I felt something cold and terrible begin to crystallize in my chest. He answered from somewhere with music playing loudly in the background. I could hear people laughing, the sound of water splashing. When I identified myself and explained that you had been in a serious accident and required immediate surgery with significant risk to your life, he asked me to wait a moment. I watched Dr. Kim's face as he recalled the conversation, saw the muscles in his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. When he came back on the line, he said, and I'm quoting exactly, "Look, doctor, I'm on a cruise in the Caribbean right now. This is literally the first vacation I've taken in forever, and I'm finally having a good time. If my mother dies, obviously call me back and I'll deal with arrangements. If she survives, I'll talk to her when I get back next week. Either way, there's nothing I can do from a cruise ship, right?" The words hung in the air between us like smoke from an explosion. I heard them, understood them intellectually, but my brain couldn't seem to process them emotionally. This was Jasper, my son, the baby I almost died bringing into this world, the child I had raised alone for the past 8 years after his father died, the young man I sent $45,000 to every single month so he could focus on building his consulting business without financial stress. "I attempted to convey the severity of your condition, Doctor," Kim continued, his voice harder now, tinged with something that sounded like controlled anger. "I explained that you might not survive the night, that if he wanted to say goodbye, he should consider cutting his trip short. He said, 'Dude, my mom is like super tough. She's survived worse. She'll be fine. Seriously, if anything changes, just text me. I'll check my phone when I get a chance.'" I felt tears beginning to form in my eyes, hot and shameful. Not tears of sadness, not yet. These were tears of humiliation, of disbelief so profound it felt like my entire understanding of reality was cracking apart. "He hung up before I could say anything else," Dr. Kim said quietly. I heard him laugh and say to someone, "Sorry about that, just hospital drama." and then the line went dead. I closed my eyes, but that only made it worse because behind my eyelids I could see Jasper clearly. 29 years old, handsome in that effortless way his father had been, always dressed in expensive clothes I paid for, always talking about deals and opportunities that never quite materialized, always just one phone call away, but somehow never available when I truly needed him. When I opened my eyes again, Dr. Kim was watching me with an expression that was part sympathy, part something else, something that looked almost like strategic assessment. "Mrs. Aldrich," he said, and now his voice carried a different weight entirely. "I need to ask you something, and I apologize if this seems inappropriate given your current condition. But your son doesn't actually know who you are, does he?" I stared at him, confused. "I don't understand what you mean." Dr. Kim stood up and walked to the window, looking out over Manhattan's skyline before turning back to face me. "I've been the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital for 7 years. When you were brought in unconscious, 3 members of our board of directors called me personally within an hour. The hospital administrator came down to the emergency room at 2 in the morning to check on your status himself. Your name is on our pediatric wing. You've donated $15 million to this institution over the past 5 years." The words felt disconnected from reality, like he was talking about someone else entirely. "You sit on the board of 4 major charitable organizations in New York," he continued. "You're the CEO and founder of Aldrich Global Investments, which manages over $800 million in assets. Your name appears on the Forbes list of self-made women in finance. You've been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Fortune magazine." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over me like a blanket. "And your son spoke to me like I was interrupting his vacation to tell him about a minor inconvenience." I wanted to defend Jasper, wanted to explain that he was just young, just thoughtless, just didn't understand the situation properly. But the words wouldn't come, because somewhere deep inside me, beneath the physical pain and the medication and the shock, a truth I had been avoiding for years was finally forcing its way to the surface. "He has no idea what you've built, Dr. I," Kim said, and there was something in his voice now that sounded less like sympathy and more like respect mixed with anger on my behalf. "He has no idea who you really are, what you've accomplished, what you mean to this hospital, to this city. Does he even know how you made your money?" The question struck me like a physical blow. Did Jasper know? Did he know about the 23-year journey from a scholarship girl from Detroit to the head of a financial empire? Did he know about the 18-hour days, the deals I closed while pregnant with him, the clients I won back after his father died while I was drowning in grief? Did he know about the first $100,000 I made, invested, and turned into $1 million? Did he know about the risks I took, the sacrifices I made, the respect I earned in a world designed to keep women like me out? "He knows I have money," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He knows I'm successful. He knows I can take care of things. But does he know you?" Dr. Kim asked, and that simple question contained multitudes. I thought about my last real conversation with Jasper 3 weeks ago when he had called asking for an advance on his monthly transfer because he wanted to upgrade his car. I had asked him about his business, and he had given me vague answers about clients and meetings and opportunities. I had pretended to believe him, and he had pretended that I believed him, and we had both performed our roles in a dance we had been doing for so long that neither of us remembered when it started. "He knows what I let him know," I said finally. Dr. Kim nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "Mrs. Aldrich, I've worked in trauma medicine for 25 years. I spent 5 years with Doctors Without Borders in war zones. I've seen human nature at its absolute worst and its absolute best. And I've learned that sometimes the people we love most have no idea who we truly are, because we've spent so much time protecting them that we've made ourselves invisible." His words hit me with the force of a second accident. I had spent 8 years since Edmund's death showering Jasper with money, with opportunities, with freedom from financial stress, believing that this was love, that this was what a good mother did. I had replaced my presence with presence, my guidance with cash, my expectations with unlimited chances. I had made it so easy for him to not need me that he had forgotten I was even real. "The nurse will be in shortly to check your vitals." Dr. Kim said, moving toward the door. You need to rest. Your body has been through tremendous trauma, and recovery will take time. He paused at the doorway, turning back to look at me with those kind, knowing eyes. But Mrs. Aldrich, I think you already know that the physical trauma isn't what's really going to hurt. After he left, I lay in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in each panel, because it was easier than thinking about what I had just learned. The pain medication was wearing off, and the ache in my ribs was intensifying. But it was nothing compared to the pain blooming in my chest that had nothing to do with fractured bones and internal bleeding. I thought about Jasper on that cruise ship, drink in hand, surrounded by people who probably had no idea that his mother was lying in a hospital bed after nearly dying. I thought about him laughing after hanging up on the doctor, dismissing my life-threatening emergency as hospital drama. I thought about the $45,000 that would hit his account in 6 days like clockwork, as it had for the past 8 years. I thought about the penthouse apartment in Tribeca that I bought for him, the $4.2 million condo that he used primarily as a closet for his designer clothes because he was always staying at his girlfriend's place or traveling or anywhere but home. I thought about the last time I had actually seen him in person, 4 months ago when he had stopped by my office to pick up a check for some investment opportunity that required immediate capital. He had been charming and affectionate, kissing my cheek and calling me the best mom ever, while his eyes kept darting to his phone. He had stayed for exactly 14 minutes. I thought about his father, Edmund, who had died 8 years ago in a stupid, senseless accident caused by a drunk driver. Edmund, who had been brilliant and creative and loving, but also absent, always chasing the next architectural commission, the next award, the next achievement. Edmund, who had loved Jasper deeply but abstractly, the way you love an idea more than a reality. And I thought about how, after Edmund died, I had tried to compensate for his absence by being more present, more supportive, more giving. But somewhere along the way, more giving had turned into just giving and giving and giving until there was nothing left but transactions. A nurse came in to check my vitals, a young woman with gentle hands and a kind face who asked me how my pain was on a scale of 1 to 10. I told her 7, which was a lie. The physical pain was maybe a 5. The emotional pain was off the scale entirely. After she left, I reached for my phone on the bedside table, wincing at the movement. The screen was cracked from the accident but still functional. I opened Instagram, knowing exactly what I would find. There it was, posted 3 hours ago, a photo of Jasper on the deck of a cruise ship, arms around a beautiful young woman I had never seen before, both of them holding colorful drinks with tiny umbrellas. The caption read, "Living my best life with my beautiful queen. Paradise isn't a place, it's a vibe. Blessed and unbothered. Blessed and unbothered." While I was being cut open on an operating table, my son was posting selfies and drinking piña coladas. I scrolled back through his recent posts, photos from expensive restaurants I had paid for, photos in designer clothes I had purchased, photos from trips to Miami, Los Angeles, Vegas, all funded by the seemingly endless stream of money I transferred into his account every month without question, without conditions, without any expectation that he would ever become someone who could earn that money himself. And then I did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I opened the folder on my phone labeled Private Investigations Report. My attorney had hired investigators after I had started noticing inconsistencies in Jasper's stories, and what they had found was documented in 47 pages of detailed surveillance, financial records, and photographic evidence. Gambling debts of $380,000. Loans taken out in my name without authorization totaling $920,000. No business, no clients, no consulting firm. Just a 29-year-old man living a fabricated life funded entirely by his mother while she worked 70-hour weeks to maintain the illusion that he was building something real. I had read that report once, felt my heart break into pieces, and then filed it away because confronting it would mean admitting that I had failed as a mother, failed to teach my son about responsibility, about work, about value, about becoming a person rather than just a consumer of resources. It was easier to keep writing checks than to face the truth that my son had become exactly what I had enabled him to become: a beautiful, charming, completely hollow version of a human being. But now, lying in this hospital bed with 3 broken ribs and the ghost of my son's voice saying, "If she dies, call me back," echoing in my mind, I couldn't hide anymore. Dr. Kim was right. Jasper had no idea who I was. But the real question, the one that was tearing through me like shrapnel, was whether I had any idea who he truly was. Or more terrifyingly, whether the person he had become was entirely my fault. My phone buzzed with a text message. For one desperate second, I hoped it was Jasper, that maybe Dr. Kim had texted him as requested and he was finally checking in. But it was just my assistant, checking if I needed her to reschedule my meetings for tomorrow. Tomorrow. Such a simple concept. Yesterday, I had been Lysander Aldrich, CEO, philanthropist, successful businesswoman who had built an empire from nothing, and who had a son she loved deeply despite his flaws. Today, I was Lysander Aldrich, a woman who had nearly died alone because her only child couldn't be bothered to interrupt his vacation for her potential death. The question that kept circling through my mind, relentless and demanding, was simple. What happens tomorrow? I didn't sleep that first night in the hospital. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jasper as a baby, red-faced and screaming in the NICU, fighting for life after a delivery that nearly killed us both. Preeclampsia had turned my pregnancy into a nightmare at 7 months, and the emergency C-section had been brutal and terrifying. I remembered holding him for the first time. This tiny, fragile thing with Edmund's eyes and my stubborn determination to survive, and promising him silently that I would give him everything I never had. Everything I never had. That phrase had defined my entire approach to motherhood, and lying in that hospital bed, I finally understood how catastrophically I had misinterpreted what it meant. I grew up in Detroit, in a house where my mother stretched $50 across a week to feed 4 kids. My father had left when I was 6, and my mother worked 2 jobs, coming home exhausted and defeated every night, too tired to do anything but collapse on the couch. I remembered being 12 years old and realizing that we were poor, genuinely poor, not in the romantic way books describe, but in the grinding, humiliating, options disappearing way that defines your entire existence. I had sworn I would never be that woman, never be that powerless, never watch my children go without, because I hadn't fought hard enough for better. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. Full scholarship to Harvard, where I was one of 3 black women in my economics program and the only one who hadn't come from money. I remembered sitting in classes wearing the same 3 outfits on rotation while my classmates discussed their summer homes in the Hamptons. Wall Street had been even worse. My first job at an investment firm in 1992, 24 years old, and convinced I was going to change the world. Instead, I spent 3 years making senior partners wealthy while they made jokes about my appearance, my hair, my urban way of speaking. The partner I worked under most closely, a man named Richard Thornton, used to introduce me to clients as our diversity hire, and then laugh like it was the most clever thing anyone had ever said. But I was better than all of them. Better at reading markets, better at understanding risk, better at seeing opportunities they missed because they were too busy playing golf and congratulating each other. At 27, I made one of the partners $3 million on a single trade he hadn't wanted to make. He gave me a $5,000 bonus and told me I should be grateful. I quit the next day and started Aldrich Global Investments with $50,000 I had borrowed from every person I knew who trusted me. That was in 1995. By 1998, I had turned that $50,000 into $5 million. By 2000, it was $20 million. The firm grew steadily, methodically, built on smart decisions and careful risk management rather than flashy gambles. Edmund came into my life in 2006, when I was 41 and he was 46. He was an architect, established and respected, and he treated me like an equal in a way I had never experienced before. We met at a charity gala, where I was being honored for donations to arts education programs, and he approached me with genuine interest in my work rather than the usual mixture of intimidation and resentment I got from most men. Our courtship was adult and measured. We both had careers we loved, separate apartments, busy lives. We married after dating for 2 years, and I was honest with him about not being sure I wanted children. At 43, I was established, successful, and terrified of losing the independence I had fought so hard to build. But Edmund wanted a child desperately. He was an only child himself, and his parents had died young, and he had this romantic vision of family that I found both touching and slightly naive. After a year of discussions, therapy sessions, and careful planning, I agreed to try. I was 41 when we started, 42 when I got pregnant, and the pregnancy nearly destroyed me. The preeclampsia started at 28 weeks. My blood pressure spiked dangerously, protein appeared in my urine, and suddenly I was on bed rest for 3 months, unable to work, unable to do anything but lie in bed and feel my body betray everything I had built. My firm continued operating under my senior partners, but I was terrified every day that I would lose control, lose relevance, lose everything I had created. Jasper was born at 34 weeks via emergency C-section after my blood pressure reached stroke levels. He weighed 4 pounds, 3 ounces, and spent 6 weeks in the NICU. I remembered sitting beside his incubator, still recovering from the surgery, watching this tiny human fight for every breath, and feeling a love so intense and terrifying that it physically hurt. I had promised him everything: education, opportunity, freedom from the grinding poverty that had defined my childhood. I promised he would never know what it felt like to be hungry, to be afraid, to be powerless. What I didn't realize until much later was that I had also promised him freedom from struggle, from consequences, from ever having to fight for anything. And that second promise had destroyed him far more effectively than poverty ever could have. Edmund was a good father when he was present, but architecture consumed him the same way finance consumed me. He traveled constantly for projects, spent weeks on site, came home exhausted and distracted. We were both successful, both driven, both convinced that providing for our son meant giving him material comfort and excellent schools rather than our actual presence. Jasper grew up with nannies, after-school programs, and summer camps at prestigious New England locations. He grew up with everything he needed, except parents who were actually there. I told myself this was fine, that this was better than what I had, that having resources was what mattered. I told myself he understood that we loved him, that our work was for him, that he would appreciate it someday. When Edmund died 8 years ago, Jasper was 21 and finishing his last year at Columbia. Edmund's death was stupid and preventable. A drunk driver running a red light on a Tuesday afternoon while Edmund was driving home from a client meeting. One moment he existed, and the next moment he didn't. And I was alone with a grief so profound I couldn't breathe. I handled it the only way I knew how. I worked, threw myself into the business, expanded aggressively, took on riskier investments that paid off spectacularly. The firm doubled in size in 3 years. My personal wealth went from $80 million to over $500 million. I bought a penthouse in the Upper East Side, a house in the Hamptons, a place in Miami I visited twice. And I gave Jasper everything. Everything. The Tribeca condo, the car, the monthly allowance that started at $15,000 and grew to $45,000 over the years as he claimed his expenses were increasing. He told me he was building a consulting business, helping young entrepreneurs with investment strategies, and I wanted to believe him so desperately that I ignored every red flag. The quarterly reviews he kept postponing, the clients he mentioned but could never connect me with, the business lunches that showed up on his credit card at times when the restaurants weren't even open for lunch. I saw all of it and chose not to see it because seeing it would mean admitting that Edmund had died and left me with a son I didn't actually know, had never actually known, because I had been too busy building an empire to build a relationship. 6 months ago, my attorney Marcus had come to my office with a folder he said I needed to see. Private investigators he had hired on his own initiative, concerned about some financial irregularities he had noticed. I remembered sitting in my leather chair overlooking Manhattan and reading 47 pages that systematically destroyed every illusion I had been maintaining. The gambling, online poker sites, sports betting, casino visits documented with photos and timestamps, $380,000 lost over 4 years, loans taken out using my name and reputation as collateral without my knowledge or permission, totaling $920,000. The girlfriend, Sienna, a 23-year-old model who believed Jasper was a self-made millionaire. The Instagram posts showing a lifestyle funded entirely by my monthly transfers while he told stories about his successful business deals. No business, no clients, no consulting firm. Just a 29-year-old man who had never worked a real day in his life, living off his mother's success while pretending it was his own. I had read that report once, felt something crack inside my chest that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with my soul, and then put it in a folder on my phone labeled private, where I wouldn't have to look at it again. I didn't confront Jasper, didn't cut off the money, didn't demand answers or accountability or change. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was I was terrified. Terrified that confronting him would mean losing him completely. Terrified that the son I thought I had was just a fantasy I had been funding for 8 years. Terrified that the only child I would ever have was a stranger who saw me as an ATM with a maternal instinct. So I kept writing the checks, kept answering his calls every 2 weeks, where he would tell me vague stories about meetings and opportunities. Kept pretending I believed him, because the alternative was a loneliness so complete I couldn't face it. My last conversation with Jasper before the accident had been 3 weeks ago. He had called asking for an advance on his monthly transfer because he wanted to upgrade his car. His current car, a BMW I had bought him 2 years ago for $85,000, apparently wasn't good enough anymore. He wanted a Mercedes, something that would make the right impression with potential clients. I had asked him about his business, and he had given me the usual vague answers. Big deal in the works. Several interested investors, just needed to close a few details. I had asked if he needed help making connections, and he had laughed and said no. Mom, I've got this handled. I'm not a kid anymore. I had transferred him $20,000 that afternoon. And now here I was, lying in a hospital bed with broken ribs and a shattered heart, finally understanding that Dr. Kim was absolutely right. Jasper had no idea who I was. But more devastatingly, I had no idea who he was either. I had spent 29 years creating a person who didn't exist, funding a fiction, enabling a lie, and calling it love. The question that haunted me through that sleepless night wasn't what to do about Jasper. The question was whether there was anything left of my son to save, or if I had destroyed him so completely with my misguided generosity that he was beyond redemption. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan and light began filtering through my hospital room window, I had made a decision. Whatever happened next, whatever it cost me emotionally, I was done lying to myself. I was done pretending. I was done funding a fantasy. It was time for both of us to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Dr. Kim discharged me 4 days later with prescriptions for pain medication, strict orders to rest for at least 2 weeks, and a follow-up appointment scheduled for 10 days out. He had checked on me every morning during my stay, and each visit felt less like a medical consultation and more like he was assessing whether I was actually going to do something about what he had revealed to me. On my last morning in the hospital, he sat in the chair beside my bed and asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Mrs. Aldrich, have you heard from your son?" I had been dreading this question because the answer was so humiliating. "No, not a word." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. "The cruise was 7 days. He should be back in port by now." "He should be," I agreed, my voice flat. "Are you going to contact him?" I looked at Dr. Kim, this man I barely knew, but who had somehow become a mirror, forcing me to see truths I had been avoiding for years. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I know what I'm not going to do anymore." "And what's that?" "Pretend," I said simply. "I'm done pretending." Something shifted in his expression, a kind of approval mixed with concern. "Mrs. Aldrich, I've seen a lot of family dynamics in my years as a trauma surgeon. The worst injuries aren't always the physical ones. Sometimes the thing that nearly kills us is exactly what we needed to wake up." He left me with his card, which I thought was strange until I flipped it over and saw he had written his personal cell phone number on the back with a note. "If you need someone to talk to who isn't involved, I'm a good listener." I went home to my penthouse in the Upper East Side, and the silence of that enormous space felt different than it ever had before. I had lived alone for 8 years since Edmund died, but I had never felt lonely because I had always told myself I had Jasper, that he was just busy building his life, that he would be around more once things settled down. Now the silence felt honest. I was alone. I had been alone for a very long time. I had just been paying someone to pretend I wasn't. The first thing I did after settling into my own bed was call Marcus, my attorney. He answered on the second ring. Lysander, thank God. I heard about the accident. Are you all right? Physically, I'll recover. Emotionally is a different story. Marcus, I need you to pull together every piece of financial documentation related to Jasper. Every transfer I've made, every property in his name, every account he has access to. I want a complete picture, and I want it within 48 hours. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Does this mean you're finally ready to address the situation? This means I'm ready to stop being a fool, I said. How quickly can you prepare documents to restructure my will? I can have a draft to you by tomorrow afternoon. What changes are you considering? I took a deep breath, feeling my ribs protest. I want the majority of my estate to go to charitable foundations. Jasper gets a trust fund, but it needs to be structured with strict conditions and controlled disbursement. No more blank checks, no more unlimited access. If he wants money from me, he's going to have to earn it by becoming a functional human being. That's a significant change from your current will, which leaves him 70% of everything. My current will was written by a woman who thought her son was building a business and just needed support while he got established. That woman was living in a fantasy world. I'm not her anymore. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'll have everything ready for you. Lysander, I'm proud of you for doing this. I know it's not easy. After I hung up with Marcus, I did something I had been avoiding. I called my mother-in-law, Beatrice Carlyle, Edmund's mother, who was 83 years old and sharp as a blade. Beatrice and I had always had a complicated relationship. She loved me in her way, but she had never quite forgiven me for what she saw as my role in making Edmund work too hard, travel too much, sacrifice too much for success. When Edmund died, some small part of her had blamed me, and I had known it even though she never said it directly. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, just exchanged cards at holidays and brief text messages on birthdays. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice strong despite her age. Lysander, this is unexpected. Hello, Beatrice. I know it's been a while. I'm calling because I need to talk to someone who will tell me the truth, and you've never had a problem doing that. I heard her settle into what I imagined was her favorite chair in her Boston brownstone. I heard about your accident through the hospital grapevine. One of the nurses is the daughter of a friend. I was going to call, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. I'm all right, physically anyway. But something happened during the accident that I need to discuss with you, and it concerns Jasper. Let me guess, Beatrice said, her voice taking on an edge. He disappointed you in some spectacular way, and you're finally seeing what I've been seeing for years. Her bluntness stung, but I had called her precisely because she wouldn't sugarcoat anything. The hospital called him when I was going into emergency surgery, told him I might not survive. He told them he was on a cruise and to call him back if I died. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought we had been disconnected. When Beatrice finally spoke, her voice was cold with fury. That boy, that stupid, selfish boy, Edmund would be devastated. Would he? I asked, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Or would Edmund have done exactly what I did? Throw money at the problem and hope it solved itself? Beatrice sighed, and I heard decades of complicated feelings in that sound. You're right. Edmund and I loved that boy, but we didn't raise him to be a man. We raised him to be a prince, and princes don't survive in the real world. They just become tyrants or beggars. Which one is Jasper? Both, she said simply. He's a tyrant with you, demanding and entitled and cruel in his thoughtlessness, and he'll be a beggar the moment you stop funding his delusions. We talked for over an hour, and Beatrice told me things I hadn't known or had chosen not to see. How Jasper had asked her for money 3 years ago to cover gambling debts, promising he would pay her back within months. She had given him $50,000, and he had never mentioned it again. How he had sold family heirlooms Edmund had left him, pieces with sentimental value but no real monetary worth, to a pawn shop for cash. How she had run into him at a restaurant in Boston 2 years ago with a group of friends, and he had walked past her table without acknowledging her because he was pretending to be someone he wasn't, telling stories about deals and successes that were complete fabrications. I stopped expecting anything from him years ago, Beatrice said. I love him because he's Edmund's son, but I don't like him very much. And Lysander, I'm going to say something that's going to hurt, but you need to hear it. This is your fault as much as it is his. I know, I said quietly. Do you? Because knowing and accepting are different things. You made it so easy for him to fail that failure became his default state. You removed every consequence, every challenge, every reason for him to become anything other than a parasite. And you did it because you confused love with provision. Edmund did the same thing, I said, defensive despite knowing she was right. Edmund had 4 years with him as an adult before he died. You've had 8 years to see what that boy was becoming, and you chose not to. Edmund doesn't get to make different choices now. You do. After I hung up with Beatrice, I sat in my bedroom overlooking Central Park and felt the full weight of my choices pressing down on me. She was right. Marcus was right. Dr. Kim was right. Everyone had been right except me, and I had been willfully blind because seeing the truth would mean admitting I had failed at the one thing that was supposed to matter more than business success. The documents Marcus sent me the next day were devastating in their completeness. Over the past 8 years, I had transferred a total of $4.3 million directly to Jasper's accounts. The Tribeca condo was worth $4.2 million. The car was $85,000. Credit cards in his name, but paid by me, had accumulated charges of $900,000 over 8 years. Loans he had taken out using my assets as collateral totaled $920,000. I had spent over $10 million creating a monster. The investigative report Marcus included was updated with recent information. The girlfriend, Sienna, was a model and influencer with 300,000 Instagram followers. She believed Jasper was a successful investment consultant worth somewhere between $50 and $100 million. He had told her his family owned properties across the United States and that he was being groomed to take over the family business. Every photo she posted of them together was tagged with luxury brands and expensive locations, creating a narrative of success that was entirely fictional. The cruise they had been on cost $38,000 for a week-long suite. Jasper had charged it to a credit card I paid. I spent 2 days reviewing every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence of my son's complete detachment from reality. And then I made a series of phone calls that felt like I was dismantling my own heart piece by piece. First, I called the management company for the Tribeca condo and instructed them to list it for sale immediately. The market was strong. It would sell within weeks. Second, I called my bank and closed Jasper's access to every credit card, every account, every financial resource tied to my name. Third, I instructed Marcus to prepare legal documents transferring ownership of Jasper's car back to my name. Fourth, I drafted a new will that left 70% of my estate to charitable foundations focused on education and financial literacy for underprivileged youth. Jasper would receive a trust fund of $5 million to be distributed in controlled amounts of $4,000 per month until he turned 40, at which point he would receive full access to whatever remained if he met certain conditions, maintaining steady employment for at least 3 consecutive years, completing financial counseling, and staying debt-free. Fifth, and this was the hardest, I drafted a letter to Jasper explaining everything. Not an emotional letter, not a guilt trip, just a clear statement of facts and consequences. I wrote it and rewrote it a dozen times, trying to find the right words to explain that I was doing this because I loved him, not because I didn't, that I had nearly died, and his response had shown me that I had been enabling his destruction rather than supporting his growth, that every dollar I had given him had been a brick in a prison I had built around his potential. I was about to send the letter when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mom? Oh my God, Mom. I just got back from the cruise and saw like 1 million missed calls from the hospital. Are you okay? What happened? Jasper's voice was bright and cheerful, completely devoid of guilt or concern that felt genuine. It sounded performative, like he was reading lines from a script titled, How to Sound Like a Caring Son. I felt something cold and hard settle into my chest. Hello, Jasper. Yes, I'm fine now. I was in a car accident 2 weeks ago. I nearly died. 2 weeks ago. Wait, that's when the cruise was. Did they call me? The phone service was terrible on the ship, like absolutely terrible. I barely got any messages through. He was lying, and we both knew it. But this was the dance we had always done. He lied, I pretended to believe him, and we both moved on. Not anymore. The hospital called you while I was going into emergency surgery, I said, my voice level and calm. Dr. Kim spoke to you directly. He told you I might not survive. There was a pause, just a fraction of a second too long. Oh, that call. Yeah, the doctor didn't really make it sound that serious. He said you were having surgery, but he didn't say you were dying or anything. I figured you'd be fine. You're always fine. He told you I might not survive the night. Well, doctors always say that stuff to cover themselves legally, right? I knew you'd pull through. You're tough as nails, Mom. Always have been. I closed my eyes and felt something inside me that had been holding on finally let go. Jasper, I need you to come to my office tomorrow, 10 a.m. We need to have a conversation. Tomorrow? That's kind of short notice. I've got some meetings lined up, and I'm still recovering from the trip, jet lag and everything. It wasn't a request, I said quietly. 10 a.m., my office. Don't be late. I hung up before he could argue further. That night I couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't from physical pain or emotional devastation. It was from a strange mixture of grief and something that felt almost like relief. For 8 years, I had been carrying the weight of a lie so heavy it had been crushing me without me even realizing it. Now that I had decided to put it down, my body didn't quite know how to function without that familiar burden. I thought about calling Dr. Kim, using that personal number he had given me, but I didn't know what I would say. Thank you for destroying my illusions? Thank you for forcing me to see what I'd been hiding from? Instead, I got up and walked through my penthouse, really looking at it for the first time in years. 1,700 square feet of luxury that I barely used because I was always working. Art on the walls worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that I walked past without seeing. A kitchen I never cooked in because I ate at the office or ordered in. A home that wasn't really a home, just an expensive place to sleep between work sessions. I had spent my entire adult life building empire and wealth and success, and somewhere along the way, I had forgotten to build a life. I had forgotten to build relationships. I had forgotten that the point of having money was supposed to be freedom, but I had made myself a slave to accumulating more while my only child became a slave to spending it. When the sun rose over Manhattan the next morning, I dressed carefully in an Armani suit, applied makeup to cover the fading bruises on my face, and prepared myself for what I knew would be one of the hardest conversations of my life. Jasper was going to walk into my office expecting his usual warm welcome and easy money. Instead, he was going to meet a mother who had finally woken up from an 8-year delusion. I arrived at my office at 8:30, 2 hours before our scheduled meeting. My assistant Rebecca took one look at me and immediately brought coffee, her face concerned. Mrs. Aldrich, should you even be here? The accident was barely 2 weeks ago. I'm fine, Rebecca, but I need you to do something for me. Clear my calendar for the entire day. No interruptions, no calls, no meetings. Whatever happens in the next few hours, I don't want any distractions. She nodded, professional as always, but I saw the curiosity in her eyes. Rebecca had been my assistant for 6 years. She had processed countless transfers to Jasper, scheduled numerous lunches with him that he had canceled at the last minute, fielded his calls when he wanted money immediately. She knew more about my relationship with my son than almost anyone, simply by virtue of managing the administrative aspects of it. At exactly 10:07, 7 minutes late, Jasper strolled into my office looking like he had just stepped out of a magazine shoot. Perfectly styled hair, designer jeans that probably cost $800, a casual button-down that I recognized as Tom Ford. He had a coffee from some trendy place in his hand and his phone in the other, and he was smiling that charming smile that had always worked on me before. "Hey, Mom, sorry I'm a little late. Traffic was insane. You look amazing. I can barely even tell you were in an accident. See, I told that doctor you'd be fine." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I smelled expensive cologne mixed with the arrogance of someone who had never faced a real consequence in his entire life. I didn't stand up, didn't smile, just gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down, Jasper. We need to talk." Something in my tone must have finally registered because his smile faltered slightly. "Okay, yeah, sure. What's up? Everything okay?" I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a folder, placing it on the desk between us. Then I pulled out my phone and placed it beside the folder. "Before we discuss anything else, I want you to listen to something." I pressed play on the audio file Marcus had obtained through legal channels from the hospital. Dr. Kim's voice came through clearly, professional and concerned. "Mr. Aldrich, this is Dr. Nathan Kim from Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Lysander Aldrich. She's been in a serious car accident and is currently being prepared for emergency surgery. Her condition is critical, and I need to inform you that there is significant risk she may not survive the procedure." Then Jasper's voice, tinny through the phone speaker but unmistakable. "Look, doctor, I'm on a cruise in the Caribbean right now. This is literally the first vacation I've taken in forever. If my mother dies, obviously call me back and I'll deal with arrangements. If she survives, I'll talk to her when I get back next week." I watched the color drain from Jasper's face as he listened to his own words played back to him. When the recording ended, the silence in my office was absolute. "Mom, I can explain." "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't insult both of us by trying to lie your way out of this. You said what you said, you meant what you meant, and now we're going to deal with the consequences." I opened the folder and slid the first document across the desk toward him. "This is a complete financial accounting of every dollar I have given you or spent on you over the past 8 years. The total is just over $10 million. His eyes widened as he looked at the numbers, but I wasn't finished. "This," I slid another document across, "is the investigative report detailing your gambling debts, fraudulent loans, and complete lack of any actual business or employment." Now he looked scared, and that fear was the first genuine emotion I had seen from him since he walked in. "And this," I slid the final document across, "is my new will. You're going to want to read the section about your inheritance." Jasper picked up the papers with shaking hands, and I watched his face as he processed what he was reading. The color that had drained earlier didn't return. If anything, he went even paler. "Mom, you can't be serious. 5 million? That's nothing compared to what you're worth. And 4,000 a month until I'm 40? That's insane. 4,000 a month is more than most people make working full-time," I said calmly. "It's more than enough to live on if you're actually working and managing your money responsibly. But the condo, the car, my accounts, the condo is being sold. The car is already back in my name. Your credit cards are canceled. Your access to my accounts ends today." He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "You can't do this. You can't just cut me off like this." "I can," I said, still calm, still controlled, and I am. "This is because of that stupid phone call. Mom, I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly. The doctor caught me at a bad time. This is because I nearly died, and you were more concerned about your vacation than my life. This is because you've spent 8 years lying to me about having a business while gambling away hundreds of thousands of dollars of my money. This is because you're 29 years old and you've never worked a single real day in your life. This is because I have been enabling your destruction and calling it love." Tears were forming in his eyes now, but I couldn't tell if they were genuine or performative. With Jasper, I had stopped being able to tell the difference years ago. "So what? You're just going to abandon me? Let me be homeless?" I slid one more document across the desk. "This is the deed to a 1-bedroom condo in Queens. It's in your name, paid for, no mortgage. It's furnished and move-in ready. I've also secured you an interview tomorrow at 9 a.m. at Pemberton Financial Consulting. It's a legitimate firm, mid-sized, respectable. The position is junior analyst, starting salary of $48,000 a year." He stared at me like I had just told him to move to Mars. "Queens? $48,000? Mom, I'm Jasper Aldrich. I can't live in Queens making less than 50 grand. And there it was. The core of the problem laid bare in one sentence. "No," I said softly, standing up and walking around my desk to face him directly. "You're not Jasper Aldrich, master of the universe. You're the son of Lysander Aldrich, who has been living off her success while pretending it was your own. You're a 29-year-old man with no skills, no work experience, no accomplishments, and no idea who you actually are because I made it so easy for you to never have to find out. The tears were flowing freely now, and his voice cracked. I can't believe you're doing this. You're my mother. I am your mother, I agreed, which is why I'm doing this. Because the alternative is watching you destroy yourself completely while I keep handing you the tools to do it. I'm not abandoning you, Jasper. I'm finally giving you the chance to become a real person instead of a very expensive illusion. He grabbed his phone, his hands shaking. Fine. I'll call a lawyer. I'll sue you. I'll go to the press. I'll tell everyone what kind of person you really are. I had been expecting this, and I was ready. Go ahead. I have recordings, documents, and evidence of financial fraud. I have testimony from the hospital staff about your response to my accident. I have 8 years of credit card statements showing a lifestyle funded entirely by me while you claim to be a successful businessman. Try me, Jasper. See what happens. He stood there, phone in hand, and I watched him realize that for the first time in his life, he had no leverage, no escape route, no way to charm or lie his way out of consequences. I hate you, he said, and his voice was raw and young and broken. I know, I said. Right now, you probably do. But someday, if you actually do the work and become the person you're capable of being, you might understand that this was the most loving thing I could have done. He walked out of my office without another word, without looking back, and the sound of the door closing behind him felt like the end of something that had been dying for years, but that I had refused to let go of. I sat back down at my desk and put my head in my hands, and finally, I let myself cry. Not for the son I was losing, but for the son I had never actually had in the first place. For the 8 years I had wasted pretending, for the money I had thrown at a problem that money couldn't fix, for the mother I should have been, but wasn't. Rebecca knocked softly and entered with tissues and more coffee, and she didn't say anything, just placed them on my desk and squeezed my shoulder gently before leaving. When I could breathe again, I picked up my phone and found Dr. Kim's number. I typed out a text. You were right. He had no idea who I was, but I'm starting to figure out who I need to be. His response came within minutes. That's the hardest part. The rest gets easier. Coffee sometime? I looked at that message for a long time before typing back. Yes, I'd like that. 3 weeks passed without a word from Jasper, and the silence felt like living in a vacuum where sound couldn't travel. I threw myself into work the way I always had when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. But this time was different. This time, I couldn't escape into spreadsheets and quarterly reports, because every decision I made, every meeting I attended, every deal I closed reminded me that I had been extraordinary at building wealth and absolutely catastrophic at building a son. The Tribeca condo sold in 18 days for $4.4 million. When Marcus called to tell me the papers were signed, I felt nothing, just emptiness where I expected to feel something, anything. I met Dr. Kim for coffee on a Wednesday afternoon at a small place near the hospital that he said made the best cappuccino in Manhattan. He was right about the coffee, but more importantly, he was easy to talk to in a way that surprised me. He didn't offer solutions or advice. He just listened, really listened, in the way that people who have seen real suffering understand how to do. I keep wondering if I destroyed him completely, I told him, stirring sugar into my coffee that I didn't actually want. If I waited too long and there's nothing left to save. People are remarkably resilient, Nathan said. I've seen soldiers with catastrophic injuries rebuild their entire lives. I've seen addicts who hit absolute rock bottom claw their way back to functionality. But they all had one thing in common. What's that? They had to want it. No one could do the work for them. The people who survived were the ones who decided survival was worth the pain of change. I thought about that for a long time. What if he decides it's not worth it? Nathan met my eyes with that direct, unflinching gaze that came from years of delivering bad news to families. Then that's his choice to make, not yours. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Lysander. You can only save yourself. On the drive home from that coffee meeting, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Aldrich? This is Diane Cooper from Pemberton Financial Consulting. My heart started beating faster. This was the firm where I had arranged the interview for Jasper. Yes, hello. Is everything all right? I'm calling about your son, Jasper. He came in for his interview 4 days ago. 4 days ago. He had actually gone. I hadn't known if he would. We offered him the position, Diane continued, and he accepted. He started on Monday, and I wanted to reach out personally because, well, the first few days have been challenging. My stomach dropped. What kind of challenging? He's struggling with basic expectations, arriving on time, following through on assignments, accepting feedback from supervisors. Yesterday, he left at 3 p.m. for what he called an important meeting that turned out to be a golf game. She paused. Mrs. Aldrich, I know who you are. Your reputation in this industry is impeccable. I gave your son this opportunity partially because of that reputation. But I need you to understand that he's not going to last here if he doesn't make some significant changes in his attitude. I understand, I said quietly, and I appreciate you giving him the chance. But Diane, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with Jasper, it needs to happen on its own merit. Don't give him special treatment because of me. Don't make exceptions because you think it will earn you favor with Aldrich Global. If he fails, let him fail. There was surprise in her voice when she responded. That's not what I expected you to say. It's not what I would have said a month ago. But a month ago, I was a different person making different mistakes. After I hung up, I sat in my parked car outside my building and felt something shift inside me. Jasper was working, actually showing up to an actual job. It was messy and imperfect, and he was probably going to fail, but he was trying. Or at least, he was going through the motions of trying. That night, I did something I hadn't done since the accident. I looked at Jasper's Instagram. The transformation was stark and painful to witness. The photos of luxury vacations and expensive restaurants had stopped abruptly. The last post, from 2 days ago, was a simple photo of a sunset from what looked like a modest apartment window. No caption, no hashtags, just a sunset. The comment section was brutal. His followers, the ones who had believed the fantasy, were turning on him. Where's the yacht? What happened to the Mercedes? Bro, you living in Queens now? The mockery was vicious and public, and I felt a stab of maternal protectiveness that I immediately had to check. This was consequence. This was reality. This was exactly what he needed, even if it was painful to watch. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mom, it's me. Changed my number because Sienna wouldn't stop calling. Can we talk? I stared at that message for 5 full minutes, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every instinct I had screamed at me to call him immediately, to make sure he was okay, to offer support and comfort and help. But I thought about Nathan's words. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I typed back, I'm glad you reached out. How is the job going? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared multiple times before his response came through. It's hard, really hard. I had no idea what actual work was like. I got written up yesterday for being late. Are you going to quit? Another long pause. I want to. Every day I want to. But I don't have anywhere else to go, do I? The question felt like a test, like he was waiting for me to offer him an escape route, a safety net, a way back to the easy life. I took a deep breath and typed, You always have somewhere to go. You have the condo in Queens, you have a job, you have the opportunity to build something real. What you don't have is the option to go back to the way things were. I know. I hate you for that, but I know. I can live with you hating me if it means you become someone you can respect. I saw Dr. Morrison, the therapist you set me up with. He's kind of an asshole, but he says some stuff that makes sense. This caught me off guard. I had paid for a year of therapy sessions, but I hadn't actually expected Jasper to go. What kind of stuff? He says I'm grieving. Not for Dad, even though that's part of it. He says I'm grieving the person I thought I was, and that the person I actually am is someone I've never met before. It's pretty messed up when you think about it. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. That's very perceptive. He also says you're grieving the same thing. The son you thought you had versus the son you actually got stuck with. Jasper, I didn't get stuck with you. I made you. I made all the choices that turned you into someone who didn't know how to be a person. That's on me. Dr. Morrison says we both get to be right. You failed as a parent, and I failed as a human. We're like a matched set of failures. I laughed, despite the tears, a short, sharp sound that hurt my still-healing ribs. Your therapist has a brutal way with words. Yeah, that's why I'm still going back. Nobody's ever talked to me like that before. Like I'm not special or important or deserving of special treatment. It's weird, but it's also kind of a relief. We texted back and forth for another 20 minutes, the longest real conversation we had had in years. It wasn't warm or comfortable or healing. It was awkward and painful and honest in a way that felt like ripping stitches out of an infected wound. But it was real, and real was something we had never been before. When the conversation ended, I sat in my living room looking out at the Manhattan skyline and thought about turning points. How sometimes the moment everything changes isn't dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's just a text message exchange with your damaged son who is finally starting to see reality. I called Nathan and asked if he wanted to have dinner, not coffee. An actual dinner, like adults do when they're interested in getting to know each other beyond crisis management. He said yes immediately, and something in his voice told me he had been hoping I would ask. There's something you should know, I said. I'm 56 years old. I have a nearly estranged son who is a complete mess. I work 80 hours a week, and I'm just now figuring out how to be a person instead of just a successful business owner. That's perfect, Nathan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Because I'm 52, I have no children, but I've helped save a few thousand lives, which comes with its own type of complicated feelings. I work 70 hours a week, and I've been waiting for you to see yourself the way I saw you that first day in the hospital. Not as a victim or a failure, but as someone brave enough to wake up. I made a reservation at a restaurant I had been to 100 times for business dinners, but never once for pleasure. When I hung up, I realized I was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since the accident. Jasper was struggling but trying. I was healing and changing. Nathan was there, steady and honest and interested in the real me, not the successful facade. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was perfect. But for the first time in 8 years, things felt like they might eventually be okay. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was just a series of small moments where people chose to be honest instead of comfortable, real instead of easy. And somehow, that was enough. Jasper lasted 6 weeks at Pemberton Financial before everything came crashing down. Diane Cooper called me on a Friday afternoon, her voice tight with frustration and something that sounded like genuine disappointment. Mrs. Aldrich, I need to inform you that we're terminating Jasper's employment, effective immediately. He was caught using company computers to access online gambling sites during work hours, and when confronted by his supervisor, he became verbally aggressive and accused us of targeting him because of who his mother is. I closed my eyes and felt the familiar weight of disappointment settling over me like a heavy coat. I understand. Thank you for giving him the opportunity, Diane. I'm sorry it didn't work out. For what it's worth, there were moments where I thought he might actually turn things around. He's not stupid. He's just broken in ways that a job can't fix. After I hung up, I sat at my desk, staring at my phone, waiting for Jasper to call, to text, to reach out with some explanation or excuse or plea for help. Hours passed. Nothing. At 7 p.m., Nathan texted asking if I was still coming to dinner. We had been seeing each other regularly for the past month, careful dates where we talked about everything except the obvious disaster unfolding with my son. I had been looking forward to tonight, had even bought a new dress for the occasion, but now all I wanted to do was go home and hide. I texted back, "Something came up with Jasper. I'm sorry, can we reschedule?" His response was immediate, "Or I could bring takeout to your place and you could tell me what happened." You don't have to go through this alone, Lysander. Something about those words, the simple offer of presence without judgment, broke something open inside me. I gave him my address and spent the next hour pacing my apartment, alternating between anger at Jasper and terror that I had pushed him too hard, too fast, and he was going to spiral completely. Nathan arrived with Thai food and a bottle of wine, and he took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug before I could even invite him inside. I stood there in his arms and felt the carefully constructed walls I had been maintaining start to crumble. "He got fired," I said into his shoulder. "Gambling at work. And I don't know what to do because every instinct I have is screaming at me to fix it, to call Diane back and beg her to give him another chance, to transfer money to his account, to make it all okay. But you're not going to do any of those things, Nathan said. And it wasn't a question. No, I'm not. But God, Nathan, it hurts. It hurts so much to watch him fail and know I can't save him. We ate dinner on my couch overlooking the city, and I told him everything. The phone call from Diane, my fear that Jasper was going to fall back into gambling addiction, my terror that I had done irreparable damage by cutting him off when maybe he needed support instead of tough love. Nathan listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time before speaking. Can I tell you about a patient I had in Afghanistan? He asked. Young soldier, 22 years old, stepped on an IED, lost both legs below the knee. When he woke up in the field hospital, he was screaming that he wanted to die, that his life was over, that we should have let him bleed out in the desert. I nodded, not sure where he was going with this. His parents flew in 2 days later. Lovely people, completely devastated. The mother wanted us to keep him sedated because she couldn't stand to hear him in pain. The father wanted to arrange for him to be transferred back to the States immediately, to get him the best prosthetics money could buy, to fix everything as quickly as possible. And I had to tell them that the worst thing they could do was try to fix it for him. What did you tell them? I told them that their son was going to have to learn to live in a completely new body, that he was going to have to grieve the person he was and meet the person he was becoming, and that the only way through that process was through pain. Not around it, not over it, but through it, and that if they tried to cushion him from every hard moment, they would rob him of the opportunity to discover that he was strong enough to survive this. What happened to him? He's a Paralympic athlete now, competes in adaptive rock climbing. But it took him 2 years of hell to get there, and there were times when his parents had to physically stop themselves from intervening because watching someone you love suffer is sometimes harder than suffering yourself. I understood what Nathan was telling me, but understanding and accepting were different things. My phone rang at 9:30. Jasper. My hand shook as I answered. Mom. His voice was rough, like he had been crying or screaming or both. I messed up. I messed up so bad. I know. Diane called me. Of course she did. Bitterness dripped from his words. Did she tell you her version? How I'm a spoiled brat who can't handle real work? How I'm an embarrassment to the family name? She told me you were gambling at work and became verbally aggressive when confronted. Is that true? Silence. Then quietly, yes. Are you using again, Jasper? The gambling, is it back? I never stopped. His voice broke completely. I've been going to this site on my phone during lunch breaks, after work, all the time. I told myself it was just to relax, just small bets, nothing serious. But today I lost $800. $800 I don't have, Mom. I don't have anything. The rent on the Queen's place is due in a week, and I spent my entire paycheck on debts and gambling, and I have $43 in my bank account. Every maternal instinct I possessed screamed at me to transfer money immediately, to solve the immediate crisis, to keep him from being evicted. I looked at Nathan, who was watching me with those steady, knowing eyes, and I forced myself to breathe through the panic. What do you need from me, Jasper? I need help. I need money. I need you to call Diane back and explain that I'm dealing with addiction issues and I need another chance. I need you to fix this. I can't do that. You mean you won't? Anger was creeping back into his voice, defensive and familiar. No, I mean I can't. I can't fix your addiction. I can't call your employer and make excuses for your behavior. I can't prevent you from facing the consequences of your choices. I can't, Jasper, because every time I've tried to fix things for you, I've made them worse. So you're just going to let me lose my apartment? Let me be homeless? What kind of mother does that? The kind of mother who loves you enough to let you hit bottom so you can finally start climbing back up. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, but my voice stayed steady. Jasper, I will pay for 30 days in a residential gambling addiction treatment program. I will pay for continued therapy. I will make sure you have access to recovery resources. But I will not pay your rent. I will not call your employer. I will not rescue you from this moment. I can't believe you. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Dad would have helped me. Dad would have understood. That hit like a physical blow, but I pushed through it. Dad would have written you a check and told himself he was helping when really he was just kicking the problem down the road. I know because that's exactly what I've been doing for 8 years, and look where it got us. I hate you so much right now. I know. But Jasper, listen to me. Really listen. You are 29 years old and you have never had to be responsible for yourself. Not once. And that's my fault. I did that to you. But I can't undo 8 years of damage overnight, and neither can you. This is going to be hard and painful, and there are going to be moments where you feel like you can't survive it. But you can. You're stronger than you think you are because you're my son, and whatever else I failed to teach you, you got my survival instinct. He was sobbing now, raw, desperate sounds that tore at my heart. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I looked at Nathan, who nodded slightly, and I made a decision. I'm going to text you the address of a crisis intervention center that specializes in addiction and financial counseling. They have emergency housing available for people in immediate need. Go there tonight, check yourself in, do the work, and when you're ready, really ready, to build a real life, I'll be here. Not to rescue you, but to support you in standing on your own feet. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough? Then you'll fail, and you'll get back up, and you'll try again. That's what life is, Jasper. It's not about never falling. It's about learning to get back up. After I hung up, I sat there shaking, tears pouring down my face, and Nathan pulled me close and just held me while I fell apart. I cried for my son, who I had loved so badly that I had nearly destroyed him. I cried for the 8 years I had wasted enabling his destruction. I cried for Edmund, who wasn't here to help me navigate this impossible situation. I cried for myself, for the loneliness of making decisions that felt like I was choosing between my child's immediate survival and his long-term soul. Did I just kill my relationship with my son forever? I asked Nathan when I could finally speak. No, he said gently. You just gave him the gift of having to save himself. Whether he accepts that gift or not is up to him. We spent the rest of the night talking about addiction, recovery, enabling, tough love, and all the impossible choices parents have to make when their children are drowning. Nathan told me about his own brother, who had died of a heroin overdose at 32 after years of the family trying to save him, how he carried guilt about whether they had done too much or not enough, how he would never know if different choices would have led to different outcomes. The hardest lesson I ever learned, Nathan said around midnight as we sat on my balcony watching the city lights, is that you can't love someone into being healthy. You can't love someone into making good choices. Love is necessary, but not sufficient. They have to want it for themselves. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jasper. I'm at the center. They have a bed for me. I'm staying. I'm scared, but I'm staying. I showed Nathan the message, and he smiled. That's a start. Is it enough? It's more than you had yesterday. Over the next 3 weeks, I heard nothing from Jasper. The silence was excruciating, but the center had explained that during the initial intensive phase, residents had limited outside contact to help them focus on their recovery without external pressures or escape routes. I threw myself into work and into my developing relationship with Nathan, trying to build a life that wasn't entirely defined by my son's struggles. Beatrice called during week 2, her voice sharp with concern. I heard through the grapevine that Jasper is in some kind of facility. Is he all right? I explained the situation, and she was quiet for a long time before speaking. You did the right thing, Lysander. It's 20 years too late, but it's still the right thing. It doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm abandoning him. That's because you've spent so long confusing enabling with love that you don't know what actual love looks like anymore. Actual love is hard. It requires boundaries. It requires letting people fail. Edmund never learned that lesson, and I blame myself for that. I spoiled him, made everything easy for him, and then he did the same thing with Jasper. The cycle had to break somewhere. On day 22, I got a call from Dr. Sarah Chen, the clinical director at the treatment center. Mrs. Aldrich, I'm calling to update you on Jasper's progress. He's completed the initial intensive phase and is moving into the extended care program. He's asked if you would be willing to attend a family session next week. My heart jumped. Yes, absolutely yes. How is he doing? He's doing the work. It's messy and difficult, and he's had some setbacks, but he's engaging with the process genuinely for the first time. I think he's starting to understand that his addiction wasn't really about gambling. It was about avoiding the reality of who he was and who he wasn't. The family session was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. I asked Nathan if he would come with me, not into the session but just to be there in the waiting room, and he agreed immediately. I barely slept the night before. I changed outfits 4 times, unsure what you wear to a therapy session where your son might tell you all the ways you destroyed his life. I settled on simple black pants and a cream sweater, professional but not intimidating. The center was in Westchester, a converted estate with beautiful grounds and an atmosphere of quiet intensity. I checked in at the front desk, and a counselor named Michael led me to a small, comfortable room with soft lighting and 2 couches facing each other. "Jasper will be here in just a moment," Michael said. "Dr. Chen will facilitate the session. I want you to prepare yourself, Mrs. Aldrich. Family sessions can be emotionally intense. Jasper has been working on identifying and expressing his feelings honestly, and some of what he needs to say may be difficult to hear. I understand. Do you? Because a lot of parents come in here expecting apologies or gratitude, and that's not always what they get. Sometimes they get anger. Sometimes they get blame. Sometimes they get truth that's been buried for decades. I can handle truth," I said, more confidently than I felt. The door opened, and Jasper walked in. He looked different, thinner, but in a healthy way, like he had been eating real food instead of restaurant meals. His hair was shorter, less styled. He was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, no designer labels visible. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in years I saw something real there. Not performance, not manipulation, not the charming mask he usually wore. Just Jasper, raw and uncertain and present. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hi, baby," I said. And then I started crying before we had even sat down. Dr. Chen entered, introduced herself, and explained the format of the session. Jasper would share first, then I would have a chance to respond, and she would help facilitate if things got too heated or went off track. Jasper took a deep breath and looked at me directly. "I've been working with Dr. Chen and my counselors here on understanding my relationship with you, with money, with myself, and I need to say some things that I've never said before because I was too busy being angry or playing victim or pretending everything was fine." I nodded, gripping the tissue in my hands so hard my knuckles were white. "You failed me as a mother," he said, and the words hung in the air like smoke. "Not because you didn't love me or because you didn't give me things. You failed me because you gave me everything except what I actually needed. You gave me money instead of boundaries. You gave me things instead of expectations. You gave me freedom instead of structure. And I know why you did it. Dr. Chen helped me understand that you were trying to give me the opposite of what you had growing up, but you overcorrected so far in the other direction that you left me completely unable to function as a real person." Each word landed like a blow, but I forced myself to sit there and take it because he was right. "But I also failed," Jasper continued, his voice shaking. "I failed to be honest with you. I failed to try. I failed to appreciate what you built or understand the sacrifices you made. I took everything you gave me and I turned it into gambling chips and fake Instagram posts and a completely hollow life. And I blamed you for all of it instead of taking responsibility for my own choices." Tears were streaming down both our faces now. When I heard that recording of myself telling the doctor to call me if you died, I wanted to die myself, because I heard what I had become and I didn't recognize that person. I didn't want to be that person, but I didn't know how to be anyone else because I had never had to be. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Jasper, tell your mother what you've learned about yourself in the past 3 weeks." He took a shaky breath. "I learned that I'm an addict, not just to gambling, but to avoiding reality. I learned that I've never had to be uncomfortable or struggle or work for anything, so I have no tolerance for any kind of difficulty. I learned that my entire identity was based on pretending to be successful instead of actually being anything real. I learned that I don't actually know who I am, but I want to find out." He looked at me with eyes that were finally seeing clearly. "And I learned that the thing I'm most afraid of isn't being poor or losing status or living in Queens. The thing I'm most afraid of is that you're going to give up on me completely, that I broke us so badly that there's nothing left to fix. I stood up, and Dr. Chen tensed like she was ready to intervene if I got angry or walked out. Instead, I crossed the small space between us and pulled Jasper into my arms, and we both sobbed like children, holding on to each other like we were drowning. "I will never give up on you," I whispered into his hair. "Never. But I will also never go back to enabling you. I will love you and support your recovery and believe in your ability to become who you're meant to be. But I will never again prevent you from facing consequences or rescue you from discomfort or hand you money to make problems disappear. That's all I want," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I don't want it to be easy anymore. Easy almost killed me." We spent the next 90 minutes talking, really talking, about our failures and our hopes and what recovery might look like for both of us. Dr. Chen helped us set boundaries, establish expectations, and create a plan for moving forward that didn't involve me fixing everything, or Jasper pretending everything was fine. When I left the center that afternoon, I found Nathan in the waiting room reading a medical journal. He looked up, took one look at my tear-stained face, and stood immediately. "How did it go?" "It was the hardest and most honest conversation I've ever had with my son," I said. "And for the first time in his entire life, I think we actually saw each other. Not who we wanted the other person to be, but who we actually are." Nathan pulled me close, and I let myself lean on him. This man who had seen me at my absolute worst and somehow decided I was worth sticking around for. "That's everything," he said simply. "That's where real relationships start." As we drove back to the city, I thought about turning points and climaxes and the moments that define our lives. This wasn't a happy ending. Jasper still had months of recovery ahead. I still had years of learning how to be a better mother. But it was honest, and honest was something we had never been before. And somehow, that felt like winning. 6 months after that family session, I stood in a small apartment in Astoria, Queens, watching Jasper arrange furniture he had bought himself with money he had earned from his new job at a nonprofit financial literacy organization. The apartment wasn't much, a studio with exposed brick and windows that overlooked a busy street. But it was his. Actually his, paid for with his own paycheck, furnished with items he had chosen and saved for. "The couch was on sale at IKEA," he said, adjusting it for the 3rd time. "I know it's not fancy, but it's comfortable and it fits the space." "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. He had been out of the treatment center for 4 months, living in sober housing and working his way through the extended recovery program. The nonprofit had hired him after he completed a financial counseling certification course, recognizing that someone who had destroyed their life with money might have unique insight into helping others avoid the same mistakes. He made $42,000 a year, attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings 4 times a week, and saw Dr. Morrison twice a week for individual therapy. We had dinner together every other Sunday, a standing date that neither of us canceled or rescheduled. The dinners were sometimes awkward, often emotional, but always honest. We were learning how to be mother and son instead of ATM and withdrawal slip, and it was harder than anything I had ever done in business, but also more meaningful. "How's work going?" I asked, sitting on his new couch that smelled like the warehouse it had come from. "It's good. Really good, actually. I worked with this couple last week, young, expecting their first baby, drowning in credit card debt. I helped them create a budget and a payment plan, and the wife cried because she said it was the first time she felt like they might actually be okay." He paused, looking at his hands. I understood what she was feeling because I spent 29 years not knowing if I was going to be okay, except my problem wasn't money. It was the opposite of money. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. "Don't," he said, but without anger. "Not yet. I'm still figuring out how to be a person. I'm still in recovery. I still have days where I want to log into a gambling site so badly I have to call my sponsor at 2 in the morning. I'm not fixed, Mom. I'm just finally trying. Trying is enough for right now." Beatrice had flown down from Boston the month before, and we had all had dinner together, the 3 of us, navigating the complicated dynamics of a family that had nearly destroyed itself. She had been softer with Jasper than I expected, but also uncompromising in her honesty about his past behavior. At one point during dinner, she had looked at him directly and said, "Your father would be proud of what you're doing now, but he would be ashamed of who you were 6 months ago. Both things can be true. Jasper had nodded and said, I know, I'm ashamed too. My relationship with Nathan had deepened into something real and substantial. We spent weekends together, took trips to the places neither of us had ever made time for, despite our success, talked about everything from medicine to finance to the 1,000 small ways people sabotage their own happiness. He had met Jasper twice, carefully neutral interactions where Nathan didn't try to be a father figure or a counselor, just a respectful adult presence. He's good for you, Jasper had said after the second meeting. He doesn't try to fix everything. He just lets you be yourself. That's what I'm trying to do with you, I had replied. I know, it's terrifying. My business continued to thrive, but I had made significant changes to how I worked. I had promoted 2 senior partners to co-managing directors, delegating responsibilities I had been clutching for decades. I worked 60 hours a week instead of 80, and I used the extra time to volunteer at a women's entrepreneurship program, mentoring young women who reminded me of my 24-year-old self, hungry and brilliant and terrified they wouldn't be taken seriously. The new will remained unchanged, 70% to charitable foundations, 30% to Jasper through a structured trust that required him to maintain employment and sobriety. He knew about it now. We had discussed it in therapy with Dr. Chen, and while he had initially been hurt, he had eventually admitted it was fair. I haven't earned anything more than that, he had said. And honestly, $5 million is more than most people see in their entire lives. If I can't build a life with that as a safety net, then I deserve to fail. The Tribeca condo money had been divided between 3 foundations, one for addiction recovery services, one for financial literacy education in underserved communities, and one for single mothers pursuing higher education. Every time I signed the donation checks, I thought about the $10 million I had wasted enabling my son's destruction, and I felt both grief and relief that the money was now going toward actually helping people instead of destroying them. On a Tuesday evening in late autumn, I sat on my balcony with Nathan, drinking wine and watching the sunset over Manhattan. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasper, a photo of him at a GA meeting, surrounded by people who were all holding chips marking various lengths of sobriety. His chip said 6 months. The caption read, "Half a year of being real. It's harder than anything I've ever done, but I'm still here." I showed Nathan the photo, and he smiled. That kid's going to make it. You think so? I know so, because he's doing the one thing that guarantees survival. What's that? He's showing up. Every day, even when it's hard, even when he wants to quit, he's showing up. That's all recovery is. Showing up until showing up becomes who you are instead of what you do. I thought about that. About showing up. About all the ways I hadn't shown up for Jasper when it mattered, and all the ways I was trying to show up differently now. Not with money or solutions or rescues, but with presence and honesty and the painful love that holds people accountable because it believes they're capable of more. I got a call from Diane Cooper last week, I said to Nathan. She wanted to apologize for how things ended with Jasper. She said she heard he was doing well, and she wanted me to know she hadn't blacklisted him in the industry. That was kind of her. I told her that if she heard of any positions opening up that might be good for someone with Jasper's current experience and recovery status to let me know. Not so I could make calls or pull strings, but so I could pass the information to him and let him decide if he wants to apply. How did that feel? Like being a real parent instead of a checkbook with emotions. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, lying in a hospital bed learning that her son would rather enjoy a cruise than interrupt his vacation for her potential death. That woman had been destroyed in that moment, and I had spent the months since learning to become someone different. Someone who could love without enabling, who could set boundaries without abandoning, who could believe in people's potential without protecting them from the work required to reach it. I wasn't perfect at any of it. I still had moments where I wanted to transfer money to Jasper's account, where I wanted to make phone calls on his behalf, where I wanted to smooth the path ahead of him because watching him struggle was almost unbearable. But I was learning, slowly and painfully, that the most loving thing I could do was let him walk his own path, even when it was rocky and uncertain. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked quietly. "The way you handled everything with Jasper after the accident?" I thought about that question for a long time before answering. I regret the 29 years before the accident where I made all the wrong choices. But the choices I made after? No. They were the hardest things I've ever done. And there were moments where I thought they might destroy both of us, but they were right. Painful, but right. That's the thing about real love, Nathan said. It's supposed to help people grow, not keep them comfortable. You figured that out. A lot of parents never do. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jasper. Dinner on Sunday? I want to cook for you at my place. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. But I want to show you I can take care of myself, and maybe take care of you a little too. I typed back immediately. I would love that. Should I bring wine? Yes. And maybe you could bring Nathan. I think I'm ready to actually get to know him instead of just being weird and defensive. I showed Nathan the message, and he raised his eyebrows. That's a big step. Is that okay with you? Lysander, I've been waiting for him to be ready. I'm all in with you, which means I'm all in with the complicated family dynamics too. Sunday dinner at Jasper's apartment was imperfect and beautiful. He overcooked the pasta slightly and forgot to salt the salad, but he had set the table with actual plates instead of eating out of takeout containers, and he had bought flowers for the center of the table. We talked about work and recovery and the small victories that make up a real life. Jasper asked Nathan about his work at the hospital, actually interested instead of just being polite, and Nathan told stories about medicine that made us laugh and cry. At the end of the evening, as Nathan and I were leaving, Jasper hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me. And thank you for not making it easy. I think you saved my life by almost destroying it." "We saved each other," I said. "I was just as lost as you were. I just hid it better behind success." Walking back to the car with Nathan's hand in mine, I thought about the doctor who had sat beside my hospital bed and asked if my son knew who I really was. The answer then had been no. But now, 6 months later, the answer was different. Now Jasper knew who I was. Flawed and loving, successful, but broken in my own ways, a woman who had built an empire but nearly destroyed her only child in the process. And I knew who he was, an addict in recovery, a young man learning how to be real, someone who was finally becoming a person instead of a performance. We weren't fixed, we weren't perfect, but we were honest, and we were trying, and we were showing up for each other in ways that actually mattered. And somehow, against all odds, that was enough. The life I had almost lost in that accident had been returned to me, but it was a different life now. Smaller in some ways, richer in others. Less about achievement and more about connection. Less about providing and more about being present. I was Lysander Aldrich. I had built an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I had nearly lost my only child to my own misguided love. And I had finally learned that the most valuable thing I could give anyone wasn't money or opportunities or solutions. It was the space to fail, the expectation to try, and the belief that they were capable of becoming who they were meant to be. That was real love, and it had taken me 56 years and one catastrophic accident to figure it out, but better late than never.